The US is a country actually built up by immigrants. My great-grandparents came from Philadelphia. Their family came from Tipperary, Ireland, and then they established themselves here, and then they moved to Texas, to Waco, where my grandmother was born. She married a Mexican, moved to Mexico, had 8 children, at least 1 tequila a day, and a fantastic, very happy life. So, in that sense, I share a common heritage with Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. But I'm very happy to be here today at this Pan American Association gathering. I am told that Mexican ambassadors have been coming here to Philadelphia to address the Pan American Association almost since its inception. Ambassador Francisco Castillo Nájera came in 1944. And it is fitting that we do so because our interests are aligned in many ways. We both seek to build greater understanding between different countries in the region, as well as promote our respective cultures and emphasize our shared history. I am particularly pleased to hear about the scholarships and awards the Pan American Association provides to college students, because education is clearly ground zero in the promotion of better understanding. I would like to congratulate Teresa Bean and Cristina Roca for their accomplishments and wish them great success in their future endeavors. Let me start with where we are now. Mexico is, of course, in the Western Hemisphere. We are Latin American, but we are in North America. In Spanish, you can actually distinguish this very clearly because we have 2 words for what in English we only have 1. So in Spanish you say ser y estar. We are Latin America, somos Latinoamérica, pero estamos en Norteamérica. But we are in North America. And North America is the most important element of this conversation, to my view. And all Africans states that there are 2 ideal moments to plant a tree: 20 years ago and right now. Well, 20 years ago, we planted a tree called the North American Free Trade Agreement. NAFTA represented a big leap in the strategic outlook and rules governing economic interaction in our region, North America. I want to underscore just a few forward-looking. The agreement was at its inception. We need only to recall the 1992 presidential debates in which a famous Texan and festy independent candidate to the US presidency, Ross Perot, said that NAFTA would create a giant sucking sound, as NAFTA sent US jobs to Mexico because of wage differentials between both countries. At the same time, some groups in Mexico also feared the sucking sound, but had exactly opposite worry and assumed that NAFTA would translate into significant job losses in Mexico in favor of the US, given the large size of many US corporations and their easy access to capital and technology. We were really treating and trading upon new ground. There was no precedent for such a far-reaching trade agreement between a developing country and 2 developed countries. By its scope and coverage, NAFTA was, in fact, the most advanced free trade agreement in the world back then. Assessing NAFTA has become somewhat of a cottage industry. But if one focuses in the preamble, where the countries state that they seek to create an expanded and secure market for the goods and services produced in their territories, to establish clear and mutually advantageous ruling governing their trade, and to ensure a predictable commercial framework for business planning and investment, it has been a clear success. Intra-NAFTA trade, $288 billion back in 1993, was over $1 trillion in 2013, almost 300% increase. Bilateral trade between Mexico and the United States has grown from about $80 billion in 1983 to more than $500 billion annually, which translates into approximately $1 million a minute that cross our borders between Mexico and the US. Mexico is the third largest trading partner of the US and the second largest export destination. As the Canadian ambassador in Washington and myself like to state it, we are your second largest customer, and it is important to take care of your customers. In fact, in 2013, total US exports to Mexico exceeded US exports to Japan and China combined, or to the BRICS combined, almost as much as Europe. Soccer fans here today know that the World Cup is coming. You might also know that in the history of this event, 8 different countries have won the World Cup. Well, 9 countries after Mexico wins this year. Sorry about that, I cannot help it. I was in London when we defeated Brazil in the Olympics in the finals and got the gold medal, and it tasted like heaven. You might be surprised to hear that Mexico buys more goods from the United States than all of the 8 countries that have won the FIFA World Cup combined. The US Chamber of Commerce actually estimates that well over 6 million US jobs depend on exports to Mexico. Booming trade and investment not being limited to US border states. In fact, 4 states have Mexico as their top export destination. 22 states have Mexico as their second largest export destination, and 6 states have Mexico as the third largest export destination. This means that 32 states have Mexico as one of their top 3 export destinations. Regarding Pennsylvania, in 2013, Mexico was its second largest export destination, just after Canada, and third largest, biggest trading partner, or we are, as said, your second largest customer. And according to the US Chamber of Commerce, almost 250,000 jobs, 246,000 actually, in Pennsylvania rely on trade with Mexico. While the goal of NAFTA was the establishment of a free trade area and growing trade with Mexico has benefited Pennsylvania, as it has the other states, something more significant has happened. North America has become a region of shared production. We are jointly producing goods through the deeply integrated production and supply chains that have developed as a result of a clear, stable, and transparent rules established by NAFTA. And we are increasingly engaging with the global economy as one single region. The paradigmatic example of North American production in the electric, electronic, and of course, the most important example is the auto industry. But aerospace production is also becoming increasingly regional. Bombardier, a Canadian aerospace company, is a good example of an integrated North American operation, where design and manufacturing are shared among the 3 countries. Bombardier Aerospace manufactures the fuselage and cockpit of the largest Lear 85 business jet in Querétaro, Mexico, which uses Pratt & Whitney turbines made in Quebec, and finally assembly takes place in Wichita, Kansas. It might not surprise you to hear that the US is the main foreign investor in Mexico. Mexico received $168 billion from the US from 1999 to 2013, 48% of total foreign direct investment for the period. But also, Mexican foreign direct investment in the US was over $20 billion over the same period. and 40 of the 50 US states host at least one location of a world-class Mexican-based company like Cemex, Gruma, Alfa, Mexichem, and of course here in Pennsylvania, Bimbo Bakeries, which has a very important presence throughout the US. Actually, Bimbo Bakeries sell more product and certainly gets more revenue from the US operations than they do from the Mexican operations. This growing intra-regional investment can be seen in the percentage of US value added in US imports. It is 2% from Japan and from the European Union, which means if you import a product from Europe, 3% of that product comes from value added, which is created here in the US. 3% for imports from Brazil. China, of course, sells a lot into the US, lots into Mexico. We all buy a lot from China, but the US value added that is incorporated into Chinese imports to the US is 4%. Canada is a different story. Canadian products coming to the US have 25% US value added. But products coming from Mexico have 40% US value added. And when Mexico exports to third countries, and we are the fourth largest automobile exporter in the world, 38% of the value is American, is US. This is no accident. We have actually managed to integrate very effectively the value-added chain. And I would say that there is not such a thing as a Canadian, American, or Mexican car. It is just, at the end, assembled in Mexico, Canada, or the US, but actually integrates component systems, parts from the three countries. Also very keen to the governor and, of course, Pennsylvania, the energy landscape has also changed dramatically. During the NAFTA negotiations, Mexico did not open its hydrocarbons sector to foreign investment. But with last December constitutional reform, Mexico's energy horizon are set to change radically, and for the better, I would say. Meanwhile, according to the International Energy Agency, the US is slated to overtake Saudi Arabia and Russia as the world top oil producer in 2015. In addition, in its energy outlook for 2040, ExxonMobil estimated that by 2020, North America would become a net natural gas exporter and a net exporter of oil around 2030. North America, thus, has all the necessary energy resources to fuel its economic growth for a long time, and reliable and affordable energy will be a key component in ensuring a very competitive North American manufacturing base. So we know that what needs to be done, and we are already making strides. We have, among Mexico and the US, a high-level economic dialogue. Actually, the President of the United States visited Mexico twice, first in May last year, and then just last February, and we launched the high-level economic dialogue, which envisions a shared strategic perspective on each other, which encompasses every single aspect of our economic interaction, and also education, which is quite critical in terms of really enhancing our human capital in this sense. Now, of course, it is very important in terms of a Pan-American sense to talk just briefly of the Pacific Alliance. 4 countries in Latin America, for a change, think-alike countries have gathered together and actually built up a different approach in terms of building a shared economic space. To borrow a phrase from George Orwell in Animal Farm, all free trade agreements are equal, but some free trade agreements are more equal than others. Indeed, there are dozens of free trade agreements in force, and Mexico and Chile are the 2 countries with the largest free trade agreements networks in the world. But the Pacific Alliance is not a run-of-the-mill trade initiative. In fact, it represents a very ambitious and at the same time very pragmatic initiative among like-minded countries. It is a new pragmatic, results-oriented and market-friendly model of open regionalism, Pan-Americanism, but of course among countries that have the same vision. Pacific Alliance members, which is refreshing in Latin America, mean what they say and then do what they say. Currently, Chile, Colombia, Peru, and Mexico are the Pacific Alliance members, but it is expected that soon Costa Rica and Panama will join. Just last April the 3rd, Mexico and Panama signed a free trade agreement that will enter into force once approved by Congresses in both countries. The alliance will provide for free trade movement of goods, services, capital, and people to make the most out of synergies between Pacific Latin American countries, and to also serve as a bridge to the Asia-Pacific region. The main thing to note is that we have managed to achieve a very high level of ambition in a surprisingly short time span through a flexible engagement process. Instead of waiting to complete agreements in all three pillars before letting any of them enter into force, we have opted to follow an early harvest approach, whereby we implement agreements when they are achieved and keep a forward momentum going with new initiatives on a broad spectrum of topics. The alliance is thus best understood as a dynamic process than it is or would be like a trade and investment agreement. Many countries are interested in the Pacific Alliance for obvious reasons. Let me just point out that the Pacific Alliance countries buy more products from the US than the European Union does. The late Bob Pastor, a very good friend who passed away a few weeks ago, founder of the Center for North American Studies at American University and a friend of many years, once said that one should not pursue aims because they are feasible, but rather because they are desirable. In forging the future of the Americas, we are making feasible what is desirable, and we must remain as forceful and as ambitious as were those who spearheaded NAFTA negotiations more than 20 years ago. As said, 2 good moments to plant a tree 20 years ago, and right now is the moment for North America. The most vibrant and attractive economic area in the world is not in Asia. It's us, it's here, it's North America.